Hi all, welcome to a Civil Society and Governance class. The topic for this week is citizen participation. Particularly, we will discuss democracy and motivation. This is an overview of what we will discuss today. The first is citizen participation and democracy. And this includes discussions over direct democracy, indirect democracy, and deliberative democracy. The second is motivation and strategy about citizen participation by Alford, which is a framework to explain why citizen participation in government decision making or implementation. This framework has three categorizations, which are monetary incentive, solidary incentive, and expressive incentive. This is a brief overview of democracy that we discussed last week. Here, the system of democracy emphasized the power exercised either directly or through elected representatives. And this is an important part that we should remember because they are related to what we will discuss this week. And let's look at indirect democracy first. In other words, we call it as representative democracy, which refers to a form of government where citizens elect representatives to make decisions on their behalf. In other words, the power is originally in the hand of citizens but exercised indirectly through representatives. Then, what about direct democracy? It is a form of democracy in which citizens directly participate in decision-making processes rather than electing representatives to make decisions on their behalf. In simple terms, it is the power that is in the hand of citizens, and it is exercised by themselves without representatives. You see the difference here between indirect and direct democracy, right? It is people who make decisions. And one of the traditional forms of direct democracy is ostracism in Athens, Greek, where people gather to make decisions to expel people from the community using a voting system. When it comes to modern society, there are three forms of direct democracy. The first is referendum, which is a process in which the citizens of the jurisdictions are asked to vote directly on a specific question, issue, or proposal. A simple way to explain this is that there is a proposal that asks citizens their opinion about it. Based on this opinion, referendum asks people to vote whether they agree or disagree with the idea for the legislation. This is a different form from indirect democracy, where only legislative branch has the voting power for the legislation. The second form of direct democracy is initiatives. So it can be called as a popular initiatives or citizen initiatives, which is proposals introduced by citizens through a formal processes to influence policy decisions. In other words, layperson or laypeople, I can say, suggest bills for the legislation. When we think about indirect democracy, only members of a National Assembly, the legislative branch, has the rights for the initiatives. And in Korea, the Constitution only allows the rights of initiatives to elected officials, including president and congressman or woman. In other words, the members of the National Assembly. And there has been constitutional amendment efforts ongoing to adopt these popular or citizen initiatives. But the important thing is that it hasn't been adopted. And in Korea, only at the local levels, citizens have rights for initiatives for ordinances. Okay? The third form of direct democracy is a recall vote, which means that elected officials' period can be ended before its term ended by voters. So in simple ways to explain this is that based on people's decision, the elected official's term can be ended, which is originally protected by the laws. In Korea, laws allow to have recall vote for the head of only local government or local council members. Compared to this local level allowance, at the central level of the government, the head is called president, and also the member of the National Assembly are not allowed to be the target of this recall vote. However, there has been also ongoing discussions over adopting citizen recall vote for the member of the National Assembly. When it comes to pros and cons for direct and indirect democracy, starting with the pros for direct democracy first, elected representatives does not act on behalf of citizens, meaning that they can pursue only their self-interest. Because of the reason, by citizens deciding by themselves, it could pursue their own values and needs, which is for the general citizens. And second, by involving citizens in decision-making process, it can truly fulfill the needs of the citizens. Third, direct participation of citizens can promote a sense of community and common bonds among citizens. Lastly, citizens have enough expertise to understand the decisions that affect them. Those can be cons for indirect democracy. When it comes to cons for direct democracy, first, direct participation is untenable in the modern bureaucratic state due to its large size. Second, people are too selfish or too passive. Third, citizens lack time, knowledge, and personal motivation to understand the public sector decision fully. Last, issues decided by government requires technical, political, and administrative skills and expertise to manage it effectively. And this can be applied to pros for indirect democracy. So far, we discussed about direct and indirect democracy. And there is another form of democracy called deliberative democracy. This means informed participation by citizens are associated in the deliberative processes of community decision making. In this process, the role of citizens is that general citizens involved in the deliberative processes that have actual influence on policy decision making. So the important part is that the participation of citizens, the citizens are informed, and the process that they are involved in is deliberative process where people gather, talk, and contemplate. And the way to do so is based on citizens having equal power as policymakers participated in the discussion. So, as you can infer from this explanation, the advantage and the good part of this deliberative democracy is that it allows achieving public value. However, the negative part is that the actualization of achieving true deliberative democracy is difficult. So this was the third form of a democracy that we discussed in this video. So there are indirect democracy, direct democracy, and deliberative democracy. Okay? Then let's move on to the next theme, which is about motivating citizen participation. This part is important in that while the demands from government for citizen participation is increasing, citizens' participation remain low. So in order to address this, Alford suggests motivation models that include material and non-material model incentives. And in this case, non-material incentive includes solidary and expressive incentives. So this sounds complex. However, the simple part is that Alford suggests three types of incentives that called material, solidary, and expressive incentives. And compared to material incentives, solidary and expressive incentives can be categorized into non-material incentives. And we will look at what it means in the next slide. So starting with the material incentives. So as you can infer from this name, it assumes citizens as clients whose work, input, follows market purchases. Simple way to explain this is that citizens can be considered as client. And because of the reason citizens have material interest in their investment of their time and effort in government services. Let's look at this way. Because of this, the perception of the value that they receive affect their willingness to participate. A simple way to explain this is that citizens are motivated by money or something similar to that. I hope this explanation is clear enough. Then let's move on to the first categories under non-material incentive. The first one is solidary incentive. And this solidary incentives model assumes citizens as partners of government in delivering services. It assumes citizens have desires to contribute to the group, and also citizens have a strong collective sense of ownership of spaces like their neighborhoods. And because of the reason, citizens and this model assumes that citizens are motivated by the benefits of the community. Then let's look at the last example together, which is expressive incentives. As I explained in the previous slide, this is also a part of non-material incentives, which means that this incentive model also does not it does not really about is not really about the money part of it. Then let's look at what they focused. Expressive incentives assumes citizens have a desire to express their aspiration to the decision-making processes. This model assumes the role of citizens as to share responsibility for the core democratic function of determining the courses of government. Citizen participation to contribute to broader society. So they saw the citizen participation is about contributing to broader society. And this is more clear words. And that includes democratic or constitutional value. And because of the reason, this model assumes citizens are motivated by civic disposition or civility. Okay, so we saw 3 different types of incentives that are associated with the motivation of citizen participation. So citizens can be motivated either by material or non-material incentives. Okay, I hope this sounds clear to you. So let's go back to the overview part, and this is a summary of what we discussed in this video. First, citizen participation and democracy. So as a review from the review of last week, the definition of a democracy, we briefly discussed about indirect democracy, which is representative democracy. And then we move on to the direct democracy. And then, of course, we discussed the old form of direct democracy from Athens, Greece. However, we move on to the modern form of direct democracy. The first was referendum, which is that citizens vote for certain proposal, for the proposal. Okay, that's the simple way to explain it. Proposal are suggested by the government, but it is citizens that make decision whether to adopt or not. And then the second form of direct democracy is initiatives. And then this is a simple way to explain this is that citizens, they are the ones who suggest proposals, okay, for the legislation. The third form is a record vote. While originally the term of representatives, it is protected, but it can be ended when citizens deny it or don't want it. The citizen don't want it. If the citizen don't want it, they vote, and then elected official, their terms can be ended earlier than their terms. Okay, those are three modern forms of direct democracy. And then there was third type of democracy, which is called deliberative democracy. The key part of this democracy is that citizens are informed and they participate in the process called deliberative process, meaning that people gather together and they discuss with information, and then they contemplate and ultimately they make decisions. Okay, and then we move on to motivation part and strategy, which is the model suggested by Alford. Under this model, we saw three different types of incentives. That includes monetary incentive, solidary incentive, and expressive incentive. The monetary incentive, you can infer from this name here, it is about money. Money can motivate citizen participation. That's what this model assumes as a simple way to explain it. The second one is solidary incentive. While both solidary and expressive incentives are part of non-monetary incentive, meaning that it is not about money, the difference lies between solidary and expressive incentives. So solidary incentives is about citizens are motivated to contribute to their neighborhood, to their community. Expressive incentive is broader. Citizens motivated by when their participation can contribute to the broader society. It's about constitutional value. It is about civic disposition. You see the difference here. So the expressive incentives, it is about people's contribution to larger society. The solidary is about community. Expressive is about society as a whole, or it's more about their civility, their civic disposition. Okay, I hope this sounds clear to you. And this was it for this week, and I hope this was helpful.